Good morning and welcome to our Insiders Briefing. I'm Angelica Berrie, and in the past few days you've been having a lot of learning sessions. So today we will build on yesterday's learning sessions to understand how the advances at the Technion will influence the future aspects of our lives. We get to peep under the hood of the amazing engine of the Technion. The President's Forum is our chance to do a deep dive and hear firsthand from President Uri Sivan on his vision, the Technion's strategic plan, its breakthroughs and plans and ideas for the future. About this same time, 2 years ago, the world went into pandemic lockdown. Uri had just been appointed president barely 2 months before, and faced the challenge of operating in a time of great uncertainty. We'll hear how he led the Technion team to make such incredible advances in these 2 pandemic years, and have the opportunity to have a conversation about the future after his presentation. I've known Uri since he became founding director of the Raspberry Institute, the Nanotechnology Institute, and his leadership has made the Technion a global powerhouse for nanotechnology research and development, with the largest number of nanotechnology researchers in the country. When Pope Benedict came to Israel on his first official visit, President Shimon Peres presented him with a nano Bible from the Jewish people, as a gift from the Jewish people. And soon a nano Bible from the Technion will be launched into outer space when the second Israeli astronaut joins the International Space Station. So it's my pleasure to introduce Technion's 17th president, Professor Uri Sivan.
Good morning, everybody. I have to say that it's incredible to see you all here today. We haven't been meeting in person for over 2 years now, and Zoom is certainly not, or only a partial substitute. Seeing everybody here in person, speaking in person, the human interaction makes a whole of difference. So really, thank you all for coming and sharing your passion for the Technion with us. Certainly, your support is critical to the Technion. It has always been critical for the Technion, remains so as we approach our first centennial. By the way, 2 years from now, we will be celebrating our first centennial. I cannot go on without just mentioning one fact about Angelica, because our friendship and partnership goes back almost 20 years. They're unbelievable. But I'll just say that the nanotechnology revolution that Israel had gone through, it started at the Technion, but it would have never have happened without Angelica. So this really incredible wave that the Raspberry Nanotechnology Institute started in 2005 spread all across the country. And the fact we are having now thousands and thousands of graduate students educated in nanotechnology and cutting-edge research all across the country could not have happened without Angelica's partnership and support for us. So, Angelica, thank you so much. All right, so what I thought, obviously, the past 2 years, I have to say, have been challenging, to say the least. As I may have told some of you, I've looked back on my job description, and there was nothing there about COVID-19. So I don't know, probably it was hidden from me or something like that. But in fact, like all crises, those 2.5 years have been a wonderful 2.5 years for the Technion, because the pandemic, among other things, forced us to think very deep on where we are heading. So we have taken advantage of these 2.5 years where we were unable to travel, or at least just little travels, to craft a strategic plan for the Technion for the coming decade. And what I'll try to do here today is really just to give you a taste for that strategic plan, because the strategic plan is very broad. It touches upon all aspects of our academic life at the Technion, and obviously in 30 minutes I won't be able to cover it. But before I dive into that, I want just to start with a short video that highlights some of the achievements in the past year and a half or so. have to say that I shiver when I see all these achievements, and it is just a small fraction of what our researchers have been doing over the past 2.5 years. By the way, you'll have a chance to hear of some of those achievements later today. So I'll give you an insider's view of the Technion. Obviously, it's just, again, a very small sample. So probably the one most important decision that I've taken throughout my term was taken in March 2020, 2 years almost to the day today, when COVID-19 was announced in Israel. We had to go online in terms of teaching, and we had exactly 1 week to do that. We did that. It worked well. But it became clear to us then that life with COVID is going to be so challenging that it would be very easy to give in and immerse ourselves in coping with COVID. And that would have been a disaster. So together with my management, some of them are here, we took a bold decision. We decided to allocate dedicated time, to dedicate resources, to dedicate managerial attention, and continue developing our strategic plan and start implementing it. And it paid big. But it was a bold decision at the time. A second decision was the realization, like COVID-19, like any good crisis, also bears opportunities. And we have to focus, again, dedicate thought to how to use new opportunities opened by this crisis. So all that led to a strategic plan we call Technion 2031. And you see here just a few points, or I would say the guidelines of this plan. First one, and I'll elaborate as I go along, but first one is one university. Turning the Technion into one organization, functioning in harmony, in coordination, taking advantage of the incredible breadth we have on campus, together with the other campus, which is our medical school, and together with our 2 international campuses here in New York and in China. So we had to figure out ways how to take all those different sections of excellent players and create an orchestra with them that can play music together in a coordinated way. That included a very important transition on which I'm going to elaborate. It's a cultural transition, shifting from development and research focused on disciplines, separate disciplines, into research and development focused on challenges. It may sound just words, but this is a major cultural change for the university, moving from discipline-oriented development to challenge-oriented development. I'll elaborate on that later. And then, of course, there is cutting-edge research, expanded research capacity, education for leadership with social and environmental responsibility. I'll elaborate on that. Strategic partnerships with leading industries and public sector. I should add here also other universities, because universities are beginning to form networks, and that's a major change for the academic institutions. And then innovative, proactive community engagement, which was mentioned before. So let me, I've picked just, few tastes of that. So let me focus first on challenge-driven. What do we mean by challenge-driven? So The traditional structure of universities is disciplinary. You have faculty for that, faculty for that, faculty for that, and so on and so forth. And it has been like that for hundreds of years, I have to say, and ever more specialized even. I mean, 100 years ago, perhaps physics and mathematics were the same. Now, of course, there are two different disciplines. So there was a growing number of disciplines, and the universities developed around those disciplines. The teaching curriculum was per discipline, research was arranged in disciplines, and so on and so forth. However, the grand challenges of the 21st century are all multidisciplinary. If you take, for instance, human health, it's not just medicine. There is a lot of engineering going on. There is a lot of data science going on, physics going on, and so on and so forth. So the grand challenges don't really care how universities are constructed. They couldn't care less, I would say. So there is a gap with which all universities struggle, and that is how to bring together all the separated disciplines, having them working together in a synergetic way, pursuing the main challenges in a certain field. And again, as I said before, this is a cultural change for the university. It's not just something mechanistic or administrative. You really need to bring researchers, students that were educated in totally different disciplines, bring them together, let them interact and address common challenges from different angles, of course. So the way we decided to go about that was to identify a small number of what we call research fronts, and then bring together researchers from all disciplines around those grand challenges. Up till now, we have identified 3 such challenges. First one is human health. The other one is sustainability. And under that, I would say energy and environment. So that's the second grand challenge. And the third one is digital industry. I'll elaborate more here about human health, a little bit about sustainability, but later today you'll be able to hear many more details about these 2 research fronts with examples, etc. I'll focus more on the conceptual aspects related to moving from faculties to research fronts. Just very briefly, because digital industry is not going to be mentioned here, let me say that by digital industry, I mean essentially taking everything we know from the high-tech industry, where the Technion is deeply integrated, immersed in the global scene of the high-tech industry, and implementing that in the more conventional industries. I mean, it also has a societal aspect to it. You know, Israel is known as the high-tech country, but only about 10% of our workforce are engaged with high-tech, with the high-tech industries. There are 90 other people. And our hope is, and here again we collaborate with the Russell Berrie Foundation, our hope is to be able to take everything we know from the high-tech and embed it to support the more traditional industries. Now, I'll try to demonstrate what I mean by a research front on using the Technion Human Health Initiative, or THHI, simply because that was the first we launched, and at the moment the largest. So here's the problem. We have approximately 170 faculty members touching upon human health in all of our campuses. That's 30% of our researchers. An incredible power. And they come from 16 different faculties. Obviously, there are the obvious suspects. I mean, our medical school, biology, biotechnology, biomedical engineering, but there are overall 16 different faculties, and you can see the distribution here. So it's a huge number of faculty members operating each in his own sphere. And now the challenge is to take this orchestra or different sections and make an orchestra so that we can address grand challenges within human health. And to do that, we have devised several tools. This is the more administrative tool. I'll describe that in a second. But there are other components to it. One very important component is just physical interaction between researchers from the different disciplines interested in addressing similar or the same challenges. For that, we need space, we need buildings. So we are about to establish 2 physical centers for THHI, for the Human Health Initiative, one in the upper campus and another one near our medical school in Bat Galim campus. The special thing about these 2 buildings is that they're going to be housed by researchers coming from different faculties. So it's going to be a physical meeting point. We're going to break the traditional relation between faculty and a building. Those spaces will be occupied by researchers coming from all those disciplines, so students will have their coffee together, argue together, listen to the same seminars, get ideas together, and so on and so forth. So this is one pillar of that program. Obviously, to do research, we are going to, or we already have, but we are now unifying infrastructure centers so that they serve the whole community and they interact with the whole of the community. So there is no longer an infrastructure center for biology and one for medicine and so on and so forth. And that's important, not just because it's more efficient, but infrastructure centers also provide a meeting point, interaction. It's all about interaction. And I believe that the fact that we are all sitting here today in person testifies to the importance of physical meetings between people. And then one has to, here's the challenge. One has to take 170 researchers from 16 different faculties and somehow make them plan their future together, create a platform where they can exchange ideas, consider their future development directions, because no faculty can do that on its own. Faculties are simply too small for that. Establish or plan new graduate programs, new undergraduate programs, decide for themselves which infrastructure centers they would like to have, what research centers they would like to have, what faculty members they would like to recruit together so that it serves best their overall mission, etc. This is obviously impossible in the current structure of the university, in the faculty structure. So to overcome that, to address it, we have decided to establish a joint council, shown here. First of all, as you can see, this is management in a very schematic way. This is me, and this is the senior vice president, Oded Rabinovich, and the other vice presidents. Two of them are here, Alon and Boaz. So we are establishing a council that, first of all, connects the management to the faculty in an intimate way, so that information and decisions can flow back and forth, and strategic planning can be done jointly. And this is a platform for those 170 researchers to sit together, plan their future together, and execute it. So hopefully, this whole endeavor will make the best out of the tremendous capacity we have on campus. So physical meeting points, joint infrastructure, joint seminars, platform for planning together for the future, and so on. I should probably rush, but I'll be happy to elaborate more later. The other pillar of the strategic plan, the second one, has to do with sustainability. You will hear more about it from Ilan Marek, who is hopefully here. Ilan? Here is Ilan at the end. And who is setting up a Center for Sustainable Process and Catalysis. I'll skip that. Ilan will probably describe it in more details. But I can tell you that catalysis is a process that underlies essentially every product you have. In every product you're holding, there is typically at least one step of catalysis. So that's the engine behind everything, and it is the engine behind adding value to natural gas and health. I don't know if you know that number, but in producing 1 kilogram of drug, you produce 99 kilograms of waste. So it's an incredible challenge to reduce that number and the amount of energy consumed. It's all about catalysis, and Ilan will elaborate on that. It has to do with materials, with food, with energy, with environmental protection, and so on and so forth. So again, we have a very large community, over 100 people on campus, 100 research groups on campus working on it. And the challenge is, first of all, to identify the real engine, and catalysis is such an engine, and again, bringing them together, working in a concerted way towards this goal. I'd like to move to something totally different, as I'm afraid that due to time constraints, I can also give you a tasting of that, and that's diversity and inclusion. Diversity and inclusion are essential. It's not just values of our society, of our democracy. They are also critical for our success. The multiple or the different points of view, the different cultures are critical for good science, for good engineering, and for a better society. So diversity and inclusion is an important component of our strategic plan for the coming decade. Technion has not, we are not starting it now. Actually, if you look on the founding documents of the Technion 100 years ago, they speak exactly about that. The condition for the first donation made by Jacob Schiff here in New York over 100 years ago stated very clearly that the university should be open equally to all religions, gender, beliefs, and so on and so forth. So in a sense, we are just stepping in their, we're just following their footsteps. But there are some specific steps we are taking within that. when I was appointed, shortly after I was appointed, I have appointed a committee for gender representation among Technion faculty. You know, like many STEM universities or STEM departments, the presence of female is relatively small. Actually, the Technion, it's the largest among all universities if you count STEM education. It's about 25%. But the idea is to bring it up to 50%. So I've assembled this committee whose task was exactly to identify, first of all, bottlenecks, and then ways how to resolve or address these bottlenecks. This committee sat for nearly a year, 9 months, and submitted a very detailed document with 15 recommendations that we are following. In fact, we have been adapting, in my opinion, probably all 15 by now. But I'd like to describe to you the changes that this document brought about. So, first one, by the way, first recommendation was a declaration by the Senate. It looks like something very kind of technical, but it's not. The Senate dictates the policy of the institution, the spirit of the institutions. I won't read it to you, but as you can see, it states very clearly where is it that we are heading. And by the way, not only in terms of gender, also in terms of ethnicity and other aspects. It is critical and very important for us to have a diverse, inclusive campus. So that was the first recommendation, and the Senate supported it unanimously, I have to say. And it's over 100 people. They all voted for that. And then we started working out, it's not only about number, it's also about the positions taken by women within the organization. And the representation there was relatively low. So we took actual measures to change that. And you can see that, for instance, the representation of female in our Senate grew from 13% in 1920. And the nice thing about it is that it's measurable. You can quantify it to 22%, which is very similar to their fraction in the faculty. Steering committee, we just started, not good enough. But the Senate Preparatory Committee, which is a very important committee, the representation grew up from 1 out of 12, which was 8%, to now 42%. This is the committee that prepares records for promotion of faculty. So it's a central committee for the university. And look at the representation there. The number of elected members on the Senate Standing Committee, that's the most important committee of the Technion, grew from none in 2019 when I assumed position to now it's half of the number of elected members to that. The Senate Standing Committee for Honorary Degrees, another growth. And this year, for the first time in our history, we have 7 deans, female deans. 2 of them are pan-campus deans and 5 faculty deans. And there are many firsts here. Probably the most striking one is, for the first time in the history of the Technion, electrical and computer engineering has a female dean. And same is for other faculties. So here you see, I mean, we have also other measures. This year we recruited 27 new faculty members, and 1/3 of them were women. I mentioned already that we have 7 deans, and due to, I would say, incredible efforts over the year made by the Technion throughout its history to increase the number of female students, this year we reached 44% of our students, freshman students, are female. This is incredible. I mean, this is by far, this is an incredible number which will actually determine the future. I mean, that's the pipeline, and this is against the fact that there are fewer high school students, female students that take STEM education and so on and so forth. And I hope, I truly hope that we'll get to 50% in that respect. Last but not least, I have appointed a new, I created a new position, which is Vice President for Diversity and Inclusion. Professor Adi Salzberg from our medical school will be appointed in the coming months to that position. And she will be responsible not only for gender equality, but generally inclusion and diversity on campus. And now to something totally different again. I'll be very brief. Industry relations. You know, when we were crystallizing our strategic plan, we tried to look into the future, figure out where academia is heading. Now, as you may imagine, it's very difficult to predict the future. So the way we went about it was a very interesting process. We drafted 5 different scenarios, possible scenarios. None of them will materialize. It's clear, I mean, it's impossible to predict. But then you take those 5 scenarios and you identify the common blocks. And if you find a common block which is shared by several scenarios, then you know that it is probably going to be important. The one common theme in all those 5 scenarios for the future was a dramatic change in our ecosystem with industry. That came out in all those scenarios. And this is not a small thing. Those who were attended yesterday heard a little bit about it, but the traditional distinction between applied research in industry, fundamental research in the university is long gone. And it's long gone not only in AI and data science, it's long gone in quantum physics, it's long gone in many fields. The traditional separation line saying that education takes place at the university and then, I don't know, the industry relies on that, is also long gone. The large companies are now also into education. And probably the extreme example of that is a technical university that grants degrees in engineering that was established by the Dyson company, you know, this company that makes hair dryers and vacuum cleaners and so on and so forth. They opened their own university in the UK. They're entitled to award bachelor degree. There is no tuition fee there. It's free tuition, and the students work a day and a half per week in the company and being paid a salary. So it's a totally different model. All that to say that the ecosystem, the academia industry ecosystem is already changing and changing in dramatic ways, and we have to figure out where to position the Technion in this changing world. So There are many aspects to that. I'll start with some and get to some others a bit later. One aspect, I told you that a lot of the fundamental research is now being done also in industry. But the converse of that is also true. Much of the technology, or considerable fractions of the technologies, are being developed at the university. And technology transfer from the university to industry on short time scales became a real challenge. And we have been working on that diligently. And my vice president for research, Kobe Rubinstein, is not here, really did miracle. So what this graph shows you is actually the number of spin-off companies founded by Technion faculty through our business development unit. So by resolving all kind of bottlenecks we had, we were able to go from 4 or 5 per year. This year will exceed 16. So over the past 3 years, if you average, Technion established 45 new companies. We turned out into the largest holding company in the country, which is remarkable. By the way, some of those private companies, that are still private companies that are valued at over $100 million is also growing very fast, and we expect by the end of this year to have 9 such companies. The largest one now, I mean, there is an investment going on in it, valued at $6 billion. So we are making a huge impact in technology transfer from the Technion to industry, becoming the largest holding company in the country. But this is not all. Now you have to figure out how to position the university vis-a-vis industry. And there are 2 potential strategies. One would be to keep the traditional borderline between a university and industry. But we took the opposite step. We decided, in fact, to bring industry even closer to the Technion. So to speak, hug them. And first of all, we crafted new models for working with industry that led to 25% increase in sponsored research contracts in 2021. But even more importantly, and Boaz and Alon, who are sitting here, worked diligently on that. We are in the process of signing strategic partnerships with some strategic companies for us, bringing them into the campus. First example is PTC, which is a large American company, essentially building something called digital twins. I won't go into that. But there are other contracts, strategic contracts with Doral around energy, with Intel around chips, coming soon with Tzemach, that's about food. Rafael, of course, II, that's Israel aircraft industry. And there is another giant with which we negotiate now. So the idea is to bring them into campus and enhance their interaction with our students, with our researchers, creating a joint ecosystem with them. So it's a major move for us. We also created a special type of positions called certain type of research associate that let people from industry spend a full 1 day at the Technion, mentor students, guide them, work with them, of course, lecturing, and so on and so forth. And those are, we believe that those are the right steps to take the right position in the new ecosystem which is being formed now. Very briefly, well-rounded engineer. We aim at educating the cutting-edge engineers, the top tier of engineers, scientists, architects, medical doctors, etc., in the country. That has been our legacy, and we intend to keep up with that legacy. All of them, at some point of their professional life, will have to take some major decisions, technological decisions, or scientific decisions, but all of those decisions will have some consequences on society, on ethics, on the environment, and so on. So we find it essential to give our students some background so that they can create for themselves a wider perspective of life. By wider, I mean perspective that goes beyond their engineering education or scientific education, and so on and so forth. That's, of course, that's the obvious. And to do that, we came to the conclusion that we need to establish a small department for the humanities. So for the first time in our history, we are now hiring philosophers. And those of you who are familiar with the Technion DNA would immediately react that, you know, philosophers, Technion, I mean, yeah, right, I mean, I must have been drinking something this morning, right? But we are doing that. We are establishing this, and I mean, to prove, I have 3 philosophers. So this is how a philosopher look like. I mean, for those, they look almost like us, but they think differently. And we are in the process actually of hiring another one, and so on. So I think that I've already consumed more than the time I had. I'll stop here. I would like to thank you again and again say that this is really just a glimpse of what has been going. And I wish you an enjoyable rest of the day.
Uri, that was such exciting progress to see. Congratulations. Just wanted to give everyone a chance to hear a little bit more than what we couldn't dive into while you were speaking, because there's just so many things to talk about. And maybe we can start with a multidisciplinary approach to research, which could really be transformational, not just to the academic culture, but to many other boundary areas. I think that if you could give us some idea of how that could be transformative long-term, and what progress has been made so far in these 2 years.
Yes, so as I've mentioned, I mean, the grand challenges are essentially all multidisciplinary. And there is a very delicate balance, because to do multidisciplinary research, you also need very strong disciplines. So you cannot just abolish the existing disciplines hoping to create multidisciplinary research. That will work for a very short time. So you're faced with the following dilemma, essentially how much to invest in continuing developing the disciplines and how much to invest in connecting those disciplines. So I feel that this approach that I was describing, on one hand, keeping the faculties, keep supporting the faculties on one hand, and in parallel, creating those research fronts that bring together researchers from all disciplines interested in certain challenges, that's more or less the right balance. And the key is creating the right environment for them to interact with each other. So I was describing those new buildings that are going to house researchers from all those disciplines. and joint research centers, and joint infrastructure, and joint study programs, especially for graduate, but also in some cases for undergraduate, creating retreats, joint retreats, and so on and so forth. I believe that altogether, if we do that without sacrificing the development of the individual faculties, will bring us more or less to some optimal results.
You also are going to expand into areas of digital learning, because to have a multidisciplinary approach means you're going to have to develop innovative ways to teach and to learn. So what are you doing in the digital learning arena?
Yeah, well, obviously the pandemic proved that we can, I would say, teach, quote unquote, also online. But it also highlighted the limitation of digital teaching or long distance teaching. So we are working. It is going to be again a question of balance, and I would say that, all right, you have to distinguish between teaching and education. I believe that material can be transferred relatively reasonably well online, and it's very interesting, because our students are the cleverest. This semester we were teaching in person, but also broadcasting online, and we found many students sitting outside the class just watching it online. So they were on campus, but watching it online. So it works apparently reasonably well just to transfer information. But generally, information is now available in many channels, not just our professors, everywhere. The deep question with which we struggle is how to use the encounter time, which are critical. I mean, what should we do now with the meeting point between faculty and students, given the fact that the information itself is available everywhere? I should probably be honest and say that this is something we have not yet completely deciphered. The challenge being the following: we know how to educate on a one-on-one basis. I mean, mentoring higher degrees, mentoring students, master students or PhD students. This is exactly the process. But this is also done on a one-on-one basis or 1-on-5 basis. How to go from there? How to essentially do mentoring, but in large scale, thousands and thousands of students, this remains a challenge. And to address that, we are now expanding significantly our Center for the Advancement of Teaching, trying to address exactly those questions. How do you educate? Forget about teaching. How do you educate a large number of students? How do you use the encounter time with them? What can you do in different ways that are easier for scaling up? We'll see. I mean, this is also a point where interaction between universities across the globe is so critical, because we are all coping with that problem. We have been operating for 800 years in one way. I mean, the professor is a sole source of information. This is no longer true. And so what is the role of the university? That's something we are now trying to figure out, of course, combined with this issue of the new ecosystem with industry, the knowledge revolution and so on and so
Especially
forth.
with science, how do you do a methodology that addresses that kind of a challenge?
Exactly, I perfectly agree. But it's a question. We know how to do it in small numbers. We don't yet know how to do it, how to scale up that. I believe that we will find ways, and probably it will include a more advanced digital sphere. We will have to figure out ways how to educate also digitally, which we don't yet know. We know how to teach, we don't know how to educate. It has the advantage that it's scalable. I mean, you can do it in large numbers, while one-on-one is, we'll see.
What you learn could be very helpful for all universities, I think.
Yes.
For the future.
Yes.
You are talking about revolutionizing technology transfer from academia to industry. And what are the implications for sustainability of the Technion, especially, and other implications you didn't have a chance to talk about?
Yeah, well, environment is probably the greatest challenge of all, I would say, and probably the most pressing. One. Ilan will later elaborate on the Center for Catalysis and the general framework, so perhaps I would leave it to him. But I can say that environment, energy, we have vast activity on campus. Again, that needs to find a broader framework. We need to improve the interaction among researchers, collaboration among researchers, provide them with the infrastructure, with the intellectual platform to collaborate. But this is a major development direction for us, for years to come.
I think everyone's curious to hear about the humanities department, and what is your vision of a well-rounded engineer, and what sort of subjects are you going to offer in the beginning?
Yeah, well, it's very interesting. What we're going to do is, in fact, incorporate humanities in all of our curricula, in slightly different ways, depending what aspects. For instance, ethics, the strategy would probably be, which is prevailing globally, is what they call embedded ethics, namely embedding topics from ethics in everything you teach. But we would also like to provide them with some perspective or some understanding how historians think, how philosophers think, and so on and so forth. So, since this is new to the university, I've assembled an international advisory committee for that. People from all over the world, from best places, Harvard and Princeton, Chicago University, other places, and we're consulting with them. So initially we thought that the way to go would be teach, for instance, history of science, or philosophy of science. Interestingly, their recommendation was very different. They said, don't teach history of science or philosophy of science, just teach history or teach philosophy. So we are now going that way. So first tool or platform is indeed incorporating classes from the humanity, formulating a cluster of classes in the humanity that are going to be mandatory for all of our students. But we also have other ideas, for instance, offering our graduate students to extend their studies by one semester, and during that one semester work on some humanistic aspects of their thesis. So I don't know, they might be working on water desalination, but water desalination has an impact on society. It has some philosophical aspects to that, some ethical questions associated with that. So the idea is to fund another semester for them so that they work out, they add a chapter to their thesis, dealing with those societal aspects, environmental aspects, things that they would not have thought about otherwise. So this is another vehicle. Third vehicle is just inviting, creating a community. We will be trying to have agents of humanities in all of our faculty. It could be researchers, let's say a physicist, but a physicist who is also interested in those aspects. And there is actually a surprisingly large number of such people across the campus. So we will be building a community, and hopefully, and it's already happening, I have to say, a larger number of collaborations among those philosophers and people on campus. The number of collaborations is growing. I have interviewed them. I've asked them, well, what brought you? Because originally we were very pessimistic about our ability to attract philosophers to the Technion. I mean, what would they do there? But it turned out that the most attractive aspect they have found was the possibility of interacting with scientists and engineers, medical doctors, and so on and so forth. So I'm optimistic.
Their thinking, yeah.
Yes.
So we don't have a lot of time, but I know you wanted to say a quick thing about security and the role of Israel as the oldest university tied into the state. And maybe if you have just another minute to talk about diversity and inclusion with the Arab sector.
Right. So security first. Yes, Israel is facing, well, as I said yesterday, the Technion is different from all other institutions of higher education I'm aware of, in the sense that Israel's economy and Israel's security is part of our mission. It's not just added value to our activity. It is part of our mission, and it dictates to some extent what we're doing. Of course, we are also trying to do the best research. We're trying to educate the best students, but this is part of our mission. As far as I can tell, it has to do with the fact that the Technion was established or opened its gate 25 years before the state of Israel. So the state and the Technion have grown together hand in hand. There are now pressing challenges having to do, well, especially with our airspace department. We have the only aerospace department in the country. We are the only source that educates aerospace engineers. And we are facing, Israel is facing some, I would say, severe threats. And this nuclear accord, which is now being negotiated, also Israel will face some severe challenges due to what is being negotiated there. And we need, there is a clear need to develop our airspace department. We need to increase the number of faculty members. They need a new building, a totally new building. Their building is the first one that was built at the Technion. It has to, it's part of it we already had to evacuate. We'll have to build a new building, and we will have to enter a new field, a completely new field, which is fast flight, to be able to cope with those threats. And
so this is an opportunity for our ATS society to really help raise funds for that very important initiative.
Yes, this is a concrete need. I mean, we work hand in hand with the Ministry of Defense on that, but we need significant philanthropic support. Now, about the Arab population, we have been working on that for many years now, actually, long before I took, I assumed my position. We made tremendous progress in undergraduate. Arabs are approximately 22% of the population in Israel and approximately 24% of our undergraduate students. There is still a challenge remaining in increasing the number of graduate students, Arab graduate students, and faculty, Arab faculty members. But the pipeline, at least, is now wider. Have to say that there are some cultural challenges there, especially with female Arab students. It's very difficult for them to go for a postdoc. We're trying to cope with that. There is progress. Hopefully this year we made an offer to 2 female faculty, Arab female faculty. Still waiting to see whether they will accept the offers or not. But if yes, that would be a remarkable
Irma
change.
is signaling me
Yeah. she means,
to get us to the next
session. But she means that with me. I mean.
But we just want to say we're so proud of the work of the whole Technion team and in such a challenging time. And we have great faith in your leadership and wish you success in implementing your strategic plan and look forward to Technion continuing to grow from strength to strength.
Thank you. Thank you so much.